You are listening to the Freedom Podcast with Van Moody. Our desire is that you begin to live in freedom every day. Freedom in your mind, freedom in your finances, freedom from the external pressures of life. Prepare to be transformed as we seek to be free, mind, body, and soul. Let's get started.
Hey family, thanks for joining us on the Freedom Podcast. On this podcast, we explore a variety of topics that are absolutely critical to living your best life, a life of fulfillment, purpose, and most importantly, freedom. But you know what? We can't talk about a complete life of freedom without dealing with what is often the biggest elephant in the room, and that is financial freedom. Often the challenges of money, not having enough of it, not knowing what to do with it, not handling it the right way is often one of the biggest issues that prevents people from living their best life of freedom, purpose, and fulfillment. And that's why each and every month on the Freedom Podcast, we tackle financial freedom. And I am often excited, as I am today, to be joined by my co-host with the most, all the way from LA, my brother from another mother, Pastor George B. Thompson. How you doing, my friend?
Man, I am doing awesome. I'm so excited about our topic today. And then we're going to talk about protecting your assets. So that's good.
Oh, that's a big one. Hey, well, let's just go ahead and jump into the deep end of the pool, because on today's episode of the Freedom Podcast, we're going to talk about why you need insurance.
Yes.
Why is it important? So many people, George, don't understand the significance of insurance. So we're going to tackle that today. But let me give us the biblical framework. George is the money maven. I'm the pastor. He's also a pastor. But I love to lay the biblical foundation and then let George, the money maven, wax philosophically and financially on why you need these things in the practical sense. Let me give you the biblical sense. George, give you the practical sense. Because, you know, even biblically, there are precedents in Scripture that point us to the understanding of why we need insurance. One of the most significant ones, in my humble opinion, this is not the only one, but one of the most significant ones, in my opinion, is a story in Numbers 27 about a dude named Zelophehad. That's a significant name. I hadn't met any Zelophehads in my life, but there was a guy named Zelophehad, Zelophehad, Zelophehad. And what's interesting is he dies in Numbers 27, but he didn't have any sons. He had a number of daughters. And the way that the community was established at that time is that when someone died, what they owned, their name, all of that passed to their sons. And so Zelophehad's daughters go to Moses and they protest. They're kind of like, yo, Pops is gone and he didn't leave us nothing. Right. And it's interesting because when you understand the context of their encounter with Moses, it is very similar to what happens often when a family member passes, because they didn't have insurance. Mama dies, daddy dies, and they didn't have insurance. And so not only is the family scrambling to figure out, how do I bury mama and them? I know that's ebonics and not correct, but I just want for emphasis for you to understand that that's the question. How do we bury mama? Or if they can at least bury them and celebrate their life, the question then becomes, how do they live? True story. I have a friend, I know a friend right now whose father recently passed. The father passed and the father had a pension. But get this, George, the father did not select joint survivorship. And so the dad died, and the dad had hundreds of thousands of dollars in his pension that was supposed to pay out several $1,000s each month. But because he didn't select joint survivorship, you know what happened? He died, his pension went away.
Yeah, it stops.
It stops.
Yeah.
And so these stories happen often. These are not anomalies. These are not random, isolated events that only happen to the select few. These things happen far too often because we often don't understand why we need insurance. We often don't have enough, or we often don't execute it the right way. And so let me just throw you an alley-oop, George, because I think it's important for people as we start this podcast to understand a couple of key things. Number one, the purpose of insurance is to transfer risk and to help secure your future. That's really important. I tell people all the time, and I am not a financial professional. George is, but I've learned enough being around people like George and studying and being mentored by great minds that insurance doesn't insure your income. It insures, and let me say it this way, it doesn't insure your life, it insures your income. That's what it is really all about. People call it life insurance, but it really doesn't insure your life. It
Absolutely.
insures your income. It
Exactly.
ensures that when you're gone, the people that still depend on you are able to continue to live because your income is perpetuated long after your life is over. And so, without having the right amount of insurance, certain events can negatively impact you, and some of those events can ultimately bankrupt you.
Right.
And so, in the instance that I just described, my friend's family was dependent upon the dad's pension.
Right.
Their lifestyle was based upon this amount of money that he was getting in. And when he was alive, he was retired and it was fine. He was getting the checks. The checks were going into the family bank account. The family was rolling. They were fine. But if they set up their budget based on that money and now the money's gone, what do you do?
Right. You know, it's so interesting as you were talking about that. First of all, the story that we used in Numbers 27 is actually a really good story about us understanding. And then I want everybody, if you want to write down something or type down something called estate planning. So if you ever heard
Yes.
that term, estate planning, that's something where there need to be a will or a trust or power of attorney, something that would have that showed the family what's going to happen. So think about this right now. If something happened to you today, where you either passed or wait a second, you didn't pass, but you became incapacitated. How would your family be able to operate? Now, just think about that for a moment because we want to actually start having a plan for that. That's called an estate plan. And then the story you just said, though, about how the gentleman had a pension where he picked life only. So he was doing that. There's also other options that could have been picked that people need to sit down and talk about and talk to your family about prior to. So one thing is I said one was have an estate plan. Second is you want to sit down with your family and have something called kitchen table conversations where you sit
Yeah.
down and you just discuss what's going to happen in situations. Like, in other words, if I go to the hospital, different things. Do I want to be revived? How do I want to have this? And this is the thing, Dr. Van, did you know that before nobody ever wanted to talk about life insurance? Nobody wanted to talk about estate planning until COVID-19. Now people do after that
Yeah.
want to talk about it because they were going to the hospital and you couldn't go visit somebody in the hospital or do last minute things. You couldn't do that. You were just talking to people on an iPad or doing something like that and hoping they got out. But now people actually like to sit down and talk to them because right now you want to look at something because the power of us talking about this today is the ability to transfer generational wealth. I'm going to repeat it again. It's the ability to transfer generational wealth. And if something happens to somebody, how does that pass to your kids? So think about this right now from your mother, from you, from your kids. Think about a generation. So like in other
Mm-hmm.
words, like if you have a mortgage, your parents have a mortgage on their house, in doing that. If they become incapacitated or they pass, who's going to pay the mortgage on that house? Out here in California, there are homes that are sold in really, really nice neighborhoods because someone can't pay the mortgage. They just can't pay the mortgage. So then they have to do something. So what you want to do is have a kitchen table conversation and one, have an estate plan, but then second, what you just said about life insurance. So is to get because that's your income. So now I have children that are younger. I have children that are 12 and 10. If something happened to me, how would my wife be able to live the same lifestyle she lives right now until they reach age 21? If we want them to go to college, how would we do that? We would want to find out how much insurance, first of all, that we need. And then you want to do that. Like, do we want to pay the mortgage off? Do we want to do this? So we want to do that because number one, insurance is to indemnify against a loss. So if you
Yes,
look at
it.
why
That's
people
it.
use insurance right now. So let me give you an example. You have car insurance, right? Everybody here, you have
Yep.
car insurance, right? You have car insurance for a couple of reasons. Number one, in case you hit somebody, you hit a Bentley, you hit a nice car. You don't want to be. You may not have the money to pay for not only that car, but if someone were to come injured, they go to the hospital, something like that. You want to have insurance for that
Hmm.
car, and you have to look at it like this. There's several ways of you deciding how you want to manage, and then you brought up a great point. You said, but what you're really doing is managing risk. So there's just a
That's
couple
it.
things you can do with risk. We're driving a car. So the first thing we can do, if we're driving a car, we have car insurance. Dr. Van is this: we can avoid the risk. That means don't drive. Okay, but some of you we need to drive, but we also need to live. So then that's one. Then also we want to look at number two: transfer the risk. That
That's
means
it.
get car insurance. So you transfer it to someone else. Get life insurance. Transfer it, and then number three, and the one that I advocate, manage it. Manage risk by doing all of them. Meaning manage risk means hold the wheel at 10 and 2, don't drive late at night, don't do, like just do certain things and then get the proper life insurance, proper car. And then you want to do it and find out what's best for your family. So what you want to do is learn how to manage it. But also avoidance doesn't really work. Like it's just in doing it, because you can't avoid everything. You can't avoid, in doing these. So that's why you want to manage your risk. That's how people want to walk through it a little bit. Is that helpful, Dr.
Yeah,
Van?
yeah, I think it's extremely helpful. I think what's important for people to understand is, we started with Numbers 27 and a biblical precedent, but I think it's important for people to understand that God is a generational God. And
Right.
so you hit the nail on the head when we're talking about how do we transfer wealth? You got to
Mhm.
create wealth, and then you have to think about transferring it.
Right.
Proverbs 13 and 22, a good man leaves an inheritance for their children's children, right? I love the Message translation of that verse that says a good life is passed on to the grandchildren.
Right.
So God is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's thinking generationally. And a part of why insurance is so important is because insurance does help you to think beyond just you. It helps you
Right.
to think generationally. It helps you to not only transfer risk, but it helps you to secure your future. And by your future, I'm talking about the next generation of people coming after you.
Right.
I think there's some important things, George, by way of basic types of income coverage. People may say, okay, you talked about car insurance. What else do I need? I have seven that I often think about, but let me list these seven, George, and then you, as the money maven, can really unpack a lot of these things. But I think that when people think about insurance, they should at least think about seven important types of insurance coverage. We talked about auto insurance. That's one. I think homeowners insurance is important, or renters insurance. If
Right.
you're a renter, I think number three, health insurance is extremely important. One of the number one reasons why people file for bankruptcy right now is because they don't have health insurance. One major health event sends you to the hospital, and let me tell you something: those hospital bills are nothing to shake a stick at. I remember
That's
one time I got a bill after one of our kids was born, and I remember looking at my wife like, what in the world did we do? Like, it costs this
right.
much just to have a child, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, a major life event, and if you are underinsured and don't have enough health insurance, I mean, it is costly. Some individuals have
Yeah.
medical bills that are six figures because of the types
Yep.
of treatments and things of that nature. And so not having
Right.
health insurance will destroy your financial future.
Can I say
Disability
something about this
insurance
one right
is
now
another
before
one.
you go to four? Can I say
Yeah,
something about this
yeah,
before we go to
yeah.
four? I can't let number three go by, because this is everybody. This is a true story, because this just hit me. I went to an event last night. I was driving home and I called someone to pray. I called two friends of ours to pray for them. One was a woman who had she had a cardiac failure. She had a heart issue. She said that she wasn't feeling very well. This is a true story. Wasn't feeling very well, but she was waiting until next month for her insurance to kick in before she went to the hospital. I said, if you have a,
Whoa.
I said, well, did you tell me? Like you have a heart issue. Say, let me take two aspirin and just lay down. I'm like, what? You know what I mean? Like, just that you're making literally a decision. You guys, your brain, your heart, there's certain things that you don't, those aren't things you wait on, and in doing that, and people that are employed, like just doing certain things. So I mean, health insurance is very important that you get that squared away. And there's certain decisions that can be made. HMO, PPO. There's just different decisions that can be made in doing that, and also understanding what programs everything works with your state. And then I just want to come back up here to auto. Is that making sure people are not what's called underinsured. Like you don't get
Yes.
the proper insurance, and then it ends up costing you more later. But then there's effective things you can do. So this is really good. So we can do this. So I also will look at some things you do. Like one thing that's very effective that you can do is that you might want to raise your deductibles, because it depends on what type of car you drive.
Yeah.
There's no point in going in there and having a $250 deductible. Like certain cars, it's pretty much $1,000 to do anything. So if you raise the deductible, that'll lower the payments. Also, be a good driver, keep your license. There's just like a couple tips that would just help you make your auto cheaper. And I'll give you one more, and then the other ones will give you some information at the end where you can get, because I did one on car buying. Is this also is putting all of it together, putting your auto and your homeowners and those together, work in those areas. And then I don't know where you live in the country, but you want to make sure you have to have homeowners insurance if you have a mortgage, but you want to check your coverage and make sure you have certain things, because I just want to let you know my hand is raised. We live in California, and there's a group that Tony wrote a song that says it never rains in California. Well, I just want to let everybody know they lied. It's rained here. It used to be a drought here. There ain't no drought anymore. So there's damage that you see, like the rain caused or different things, or set up for other things to happen. You know what I mean? Like so
Yeah.
that you want to do that. So you want to make sure that you do an audit. So I'll say this, I was going to say it at the end, but I'll say it right now. That what you guys do is that you want to ask for a sheet. There's a sheet that they have where they'll send you of all your insurance coverages and the benefits. You actually want to walk through that with your insurance person, and then we want to have you go through that.
The poorest person on earth is the person without faith. Humanity has been led to a critical crossroad, wondering if there is an alternative to the world as we have made it. In essence, a lot of people have simply stopped believing in anything or anyone. They have simply lost their faith in faith. While it is absolutely tragic to lose a job, to lose a spouse, to lose a child or home or business, these are not the greatest losses one can experience. The greatest loss in life is the loss of belief. When one loses the ability to believe, one loses both faith and hope. When hope is lost, purpose is canceled, and life is robbed of meaning. Belief is the raw material required for commitment, persistence, and faithfulness. No man or woman can live beyond their belief, for without faith, all hope is lost. As a person whose life has been radically transformed by genuine faith, Dr. Van Moody has a passion for helping people understand what real biblical faith is and why it's so important. If our belief is gone, our life shrinks because possibilities are limited and our expectations are low. Believe is a must-read for anyone wanting to understand real biblical faith in order to believe big and live a life full of endless possibilities and limitless opportunities. Visit vanmoody.org or anywhere books are sold to get your copy today.
Right. So now we're on number 4. We hit auto, homeowners,
Right.
and renters. Please have renters insurance, because if something
Yes.
happens in there, if something gets stolen, you always call your landlord, and then they'll let you know that's your responsibility, and you should have renters insurance. Number 4.
Yep. So we covered auto, homeowners and renters, health. Number 4, disability insurance.
Yep.
If you were to become disabled and can't continue to do what you do. So we all have jobs that provide a certain income, and it's that income that factors into our budget and our lifestyle. Well, disability insurance provides for what happens if you can't do, you're still alive, you don't die, but you can't fulfill your responsibilities because of a medical event or something else that happened. So disability insurance is a big one. Here's a growing one going to number 5, long-term care. That's a big one. We are now experiencing in our country people living longer. And then the challenge of the quality of that life. George, I don't know if you've ever had to experience this, but, we had to deal with, my grandfather had a stroke, and then how do we provide care for him? And then my grandmother, and then, prior to my mother passing, my mother had early stage dementia. And so it became a question as a family for how do we provide long-term care for them? And it costs. It absolutely costs. And the costs, they're not cheap. They're
Right.
absolutely not cheap. And so that's another insurance, number five, that you want to think about. Number
Yep.
six, identity theft. Fastest growing crime in America right now is identity theft. And so how do you protect what happens if, the dark web, your stuff is out there and, people run up credit card bills and start buying things and spending money that they say is in your name and you didn't do that. How do you recover from those kinds of things? And then the seventh, and I love to say how seven is the number of completion, is where we started with life insurance.
Mhm.
Really, really important. Insurance, life insurance doesn't insure your life, it insures your income, and it is a critical tool for your financial future. George, what do you think about my list? Is it a
I,
complete list? What am I
that is
missing?
an awesome list and everything. And let me tell you something. You guys know I always I got to give them a hand before I even start, even before I get going. There's a lot of things that people. I'm gonna say three or four. Everybody in the chat, can you type in the chat or whenever you're doing? Let me know which one you hadn't thought about until he said it. See, there's a lot of ones that no one thinks about until that
Yep.
happens. So, like,
Yep.
for example, I'm going to cover them in a little bit in a moment, but I'm going to long-term care. No one thinks about that until something happens to their parent, and then when they want to get it, is too late.
Yep.
And in life, so people haven't thought of those until you get into those bonds. I recently just went to a senior, I didn't say senior, sorry, mature living facility, and we did with actually a bank, Chase Bank. We did one on. It was on identity theft. So I just want to take that one first. The scams are getting newer and newer. The new one is, I don't know if you guys have seen this one, but where they call up and it says it's your grandchild and they're in prison and they need some money to get them out. And then they're talking so fast and all things like this. And then so we went over all of the identity theft things. So that's one, to check for insurance for that, but you may check who does your homeowners and your car, but you also may want to look for insurance on that. But then there's also certain guardrails that you want to have. There's also a sheet that I'm going to find that also has it that where we go through like just certain things like you don't take solicitor calls. People ask for sensitive information. Don't click on certain things on your email. There's just certain things you want to do to really stop that identity theft. And whenever people call up panic, it's not true. The IRS don't call you. Your banks don't call you. You have to call them. So, and the same thing and the same thing with relatives or anything, you want to make sure that you keep that identity one under control, or you have a plan for that. All right, so now let's go. Disability first is that's an example also that you want to have that type of insurance. Also, a lot of times when people open a business, they don't get that. They can become injured, or something can happen where it prohibits your ability to receive income. So you want to have that. And then you want to get your own policy, because a lot of times when you get a mortgage or you get a car or you get an individual product that's expensive or maybe deemed as expensive, they'll try to offer you for that. Like in other words, they'll say, "Oh, we'll give you disability on the mortgage." What it is they'll make the minimum payment on your mortgage, but not your other bills. So
Mm-hmm.
make sure you get a comprehensive disability policy that does all that. And then obviously, when people are pregnant, you guys know Aflac, there's different companies that offer different plans for different things in life. So you also want to make sure that you look at that as well as disability. Then I'm going to do long-term care and life insurance. Want to do those two together, okay? Long-term care is probably one of the biggest areas. Health benefits, just having health insurance, and long-term care are probably the two biggest expenses that people have that they didn't think that they would have, or they didn't know how expensive it was. So let's start with long-term care. Every day you can do 6 things, okay? These are called assisted daily living, okay? That means you can this is what you can do by yourself. Make food, eat it, go to the bathroom, hold it, dress yourself, means put your clothes on, and transfer. Transfer means you can stand up here and go sit down over there. When you can't do two of those things, meaning you can only do four things, that's when you can start to receive something called long-term care. And then that means that someone's helping you do that. So there's a few ways of you having that. One is you staying in your home and someone
Mm-hmm.
coming over. How that happens is usually someone comes over about 4 hours a day, or come over for breakfast, and they come over again at lunch, and then at night. You guys ever heard of Meals on Wheels? So that what they do is that's when you start to get some care. Then it goes to 8 hours. Then it may go to 16. Then when it goes to 24-hour care, it depends on what state you're in. But that can be that expense can usually eat up most retirements and pensions within a year. Like that can be very expensive. So what you want to do is you want to get insurance. You want to have insurance for that. So that's like protecting that. So that's long-term care. And then you want to look at that. Now, right now, I want you to think about you, but then look at your parents, or also look at your grandparents, because they'll say, oh, I have a pension, I'm doing this, or these areas. And then we're going to talk about Medicaid, Medicare, different things like that. But those are also different systems. So one is you can be at your house. The second option is that you would go to a facility. So those facilities, depending on it, but you want to have a plan for this, for long-term care. Then now I'd like to move to life insurance, since that's the seventh one. So life insurance is, again, indemnify against a loss. You want to look at how much insurance you need, and there are calculations that can be done on that. And then I'll also put some little information at the end that you can kind of contact and kind of look at that. But also, just start thinking about how much you would need, or how much your spouse would need, how much they need to do certain things. Like one is be able to maintain the same lifestyle that they have right now, especially if you have kids. And then you also want to think about your kids through college. And then that they would be able to replace that income. Then the second is your mortgage. And there's just some things you want to think about, and then just where they can have that standard of living, or things that you want to do. Second life insurance I also like to talk about is, if you own a business, one of the first things you want to think about is there's something called a buy-sell agreement. I know whoever you work with is the greatest person ever, but imagine if you have a business with someone. Let's say me and you, Dr. Matt, we had a business together. It would be better if we have the family. If you would just, can I use $1 million? Is a couple $1 million, $1 million? Is that if something happened to one of us, the other party would get $1 million, and they would own the business, and you would receive the money. So it would be, so that way you're not partnering with someone who doesn't either know the business, can't operate the business the same, and then they're 50-50. You know what I mean? Like, so that you would do that. So you want to make your insurance, and that be insuring your business. And then there's also some benefits in that. And then we can also talk about some tax benefits or different things depending on your situation on how you would do that. But these 7 areas are ones that people need to look at, and then also develop a plan on those, and then implement those as well.
Wow. Well, George, we already need another episode to really unpack this, but praise God, we have our bonus episode for our Freedom Podcast partners, and we're going to get into some of this in our bonus episode, more details about life insurance, details around it. But what we wanted to do in this first episode was to at least, cast a high level understanding of why life insurance is so very, very important. And so I hope that you've been blessed. George, before we close this episode, because we just dropped a bomb of a lot of things, I know we got lots of questions. People may want to reach you. They may want to get information about how to even partner with this podcast so they can get access to some of the other resources. So let's give them that info. How do they connect with you, George?
Gotcha. Quite simply, you just go to georgebthompson.com, or I Can't Find George, and you just click on Work with George. And there's different things. I can send you some more information regarding this. But insurance is very, very, and protect is very, very important. So I'm glad, and think about that for you and your family.
And for me, you can always find me at vanmoody.org or twccc.org. Listen, if this podcast has added any value to your life, like it, subscribe to it. You can also at vanmoody.org find more information about the Freedom Podcast if you'd like to become a partner. And let me give thanks to all of our Freedom Podcast partners. Whether you are a Freedom funder, a Freedom champion, you are helping us to continue to bring curated content like this to the masses. And I want to thank you. And partners, I'm super excited for this bonus episode where we're going to unpack more on this subject that is just for you. But if you're interested in how to become a partner in this podcast and more information about it, you can find information at vanmoody.org. George, I feel like we just scratched the surface on this, man. I'm looking forward to our bonus episode, but we may have to come back and revisit this. What do you think?
Yeah, we are, because there's so much. The reason why I'm saying that all this is there's so much information. That's why I'm saying that there's things that are available today that are solutions for them. And we just want to make sure we're giving enough information where you can make an informed decision. So, yeah.
All right. Well, family, it's been a great episode. We look forward to you joining us the next time on the Freedom Podcast. Take care.
Thank you for listening to the Freedom Podcast. If you find inspiration, education, or fulfillment in our episodes, consider becoming a partner. Your donation ensures that we will continue delivering quality content alongside some of today's leading experts. Connect with us by becoming a Freedom Friend, a Freedom Champion, or a Freedom Funder. Together, we will continue to produce content that provides hope and healing. Thank you. Your generosity is appreciated.